Everyone is staring at the headlines about the failed negotiations in Islamabad. If you are looking there, you are already blind to the knife at the throat of the global economy. The real story isn't a meeting that lasted 21 hours without a result. It is a surgical strike on the flow of the world's lifeblood. The media is busy talking about Vice President J.D. Vance and his departure from Pakistan without a roadmap for peace. They call it a diplomatic failure. That is the first lie. It was not a failure. It was a clarification of the battlefield. When the talking stops, the engines start. We are moving from the theater of words to the theater of kinetic reality. The chessboard is no longer in a conference room in Islamabad. It has shifted to the 30-mile wide choke point known as the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump just dropped a digital bomb on Truth Social that effectively ends the era of naval passivity. He isn't talking about symbolic sanctions or quarantines that mean nothing in the real world. He is talking about a total blockade. A total blockade. A total blockade. This is the geopolitical surgeon at work, cutting off the oxygen to a regime that has lived on the margins of international law for decades. Don't be fooled by the simplicity of the word blockade. This isn't just ships standing in a line. This is a complex matrix of maritime control, acoustic tracking, and financial strangulation. The United States Navy has been ordered to engage any vessel attempting to enter or exit this strategic corridor, but there is a filter in this machine. Washington is targeting a very specific group. The ships that have been paying protection fees to Tehran. For months, Iran has been running a high-stakes racket, charging transit fees to tankers in exchange for not blowing them up. It was a brilliant, low-cost strategy that turned the strait into a private toll road for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That era ended with a single social media post. The directive is clear. Any ship that fuels the Iranian treasury by paying these illegal fees loses its right to safe passage. They are being stripped of their maritime insurance and their physical protection. They are now targets in a high seas hunt. This is where the exchange ratio becomes a nightmare for the established order. Everyone knows the F-35 costs $100 million. Everyone knows a single interceptor missile costs $2 million. And we know an Iranian Shah drone costs less than $20,000. And the math of the old world was broken. You cannot win a war by spending $2 million to kill a $20,000 piece of flying junk. That is how empires bleed out. That is how Pax Americana becomes a bankrupt memory. But the blockade changes the denominator. Instead of waiting for the drones to fly, the U.S. is stopping the money that buys the drones. It is a reversal of the bleeding white strategy. Now it is Tehran that must decide if it wants to starve or fight a force that has finally decided to stop playing by the rules of proportional response. The naval architecture of this move is massive. We are looking at the deployment of at least 2 carrier strike groups to the region. The USS Abraham Lincoln is already there, its deck humming with the sound of ready alert fighters. And the USS George Bush is currently steaming toward the theater after leaving Virginia in late March. This isn't just about 2 ships. This is about the hundreds of Tomahawk missiles, the Aegis destroyers, and the nuclear-powered attack submarines lurking in the shadows. There are 16 black shadows under the surface of the Arabian Sea right now. They are waiting. And the logic of the staccato impact is being applied to the waves. Stop the ships, cut the cash, kill the leverage. It is a 3-step blueprint for a regional reset. But there is a ghost at this feast, and its name is Beijing. China doesn't care about democracy or maritime law in the way the State Department pretends to. China cares about the price of a barrel of oil and the stability of its industrial machine. If a Chinese tanker carrying Iranian crude is intercepted by a U.S. destroyer, the matrix shifts again. We aren't just talking about a regional skirmish anymore. We are talking about the Malacca Dilemma coming to life in the Persian Gulf. Beijing has a choice. They can act as the great mediator, as they did a week ago when they brokered a temporary truce, or they can start their own escort missions. Imagine a world where Chinese destroyers and American destroyers are playing a game of chicken in a 30-mile wide channel. That is the escalation ladder that no one wants to climb, but everyone is staring at. The risk of a hostile takeover of global trade routes is no longer a conspiracy theory. It is a line item in the Pentagon's daily briefing. Let's talk about the domestic slap. Donald Trump knows that the biggest threat to his power isn't an Iranian missile. It's the price of gas at a station in Ohio. Inflation hit 3.3% last month. In the world of pragmatic economics, that is a flashing red light. This blockade is a gamble that the market will see the clearing of the strait as a long-term win rather than a short-term shock. By using the Navy to sweep mines and remove the Iranian tax on shipping, Washington is trying to artificially lower the insurance premiums that have spiked since the conflict began. It is a coup de main against the energy markets. If it works, the price of oil drops because the risk of accidental explosions disappears. If it fails, we are looking at $150 a barrel and a global recession that will make 2008 look like a rehearsal. The rogue analyst sees the subtext here. The unsaid is that the U.S. is no longer willing to protect a global order that benefits its rivals more than itself. Why should the U.S. Navy spend billions to keep the lanes open for tankers heading to Chinese ports while Beijing signs strategic partnerships with the very people planting the mines? It is the end of strategic naivete. The era of being the world's unpaid security guard is over. Trump is demanding a return on investment for every carrier group deployed. The Saudi and UAE factor is the next layer of the matrix. They are being asked to patrol their own coastal waters. This is a trap of sorts. If they join the blockade, they become targets for Iranian retaliation. If they don't, they lose the protection of the American umbrella. There is no neutral ground. You are either with the blockade or you are part of the problem. And this is the pragmatism of the new administration, forcing allies to put skin in the game. Let's look at the logical leap. From a technical detail to a macro consequence, the U.S. is deploying minesweeping destroyers. That sounds boring. It sounds like maintenance. But minesweeping is the precursor to a full-scale escort operation. You don't clear the path unless you intend to drive the truck. This signals that the U.S. is preparing to take over the entire logistics chain of the Gulf. What happens to the petrodollar? If the U.S. controls the physical flow of oil and the currency it is traded in, it maintains its status as the global hegemon. But if Iran and China find a way to bypass the blockade, using the shadow fleet and UN-denominated insurance, the empire collapses. The shadow fleet is a collection of aging tankers with no clear ownership, sailing under flags of convenience. They are the ghosts of the chessboard. They have been the primary tool for Iran to bypass sanctions for years. The new blockade rules are designed to turn these ghosts into targets. The message to the maritime world is clear. We don't care about your flag, we care about your ledger. If the money trail leads to Tehran, the ship stays in port, or it gets boarded by Navy SEALs. It's that simple. The logistics of boarding a ship are a nightmare. It requires human capital that is finite. You can't board every ship. You have to choose. You have to make an example of one to scare the 1,000. This is the power of three in action. Intimidate, intercept, insulate. Intimidate the shippers, intercept the violators, insulate the economy. But what about the deep state and the internal friction in Washington? Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio are looking at 2028. They know that a hot war in the Gulf could burn their political futures to ash. There is a chasm between the populist rhetoric of America First and the imperial reality of global maritime control. You cannot be an isolationist and the master of the Strait of Hormuz at the same time. That is the fundamental contradiction of the current doctrine. The geopolitical surgeon doesn't care about contradictions. He cares about leverage. Right now, the U.S. is using the Navy as a giant lever to pry the Iranian economy apart. We must mention the Russian Wildgaker. Moscow is already escorting its tankers near the United Kingdom. They are showing the world that sovereign escort is the new norm. If Russia decides to send a frigate to escort an Iranian tanker, does the U.S. Navy open fire? That is the red line that keeps the generals awake at night. We are talking about a direct kinetic encounter between nuclear-powered states over a cargo of crude oil. It sounds like a bad techno thriller from the 1980s, but it is the reality of 2025. The humor of the situation, if you can call it that, is the sheer uselessness of traditional international law. The United Nations is a ghost. The maritime courts are a joke. Power is the only dictionary that matters. Now, the transcript mentions the failed Pakistan talks one more time. Let's be honest. Those talks were a mime. They were a performance for the cameras to show that the U.S. tried diplomacy. Before the blockade started, it was a blueprint for escalation. You offer a deal, you know they will refuse, then you use the refusal as the moral high ground to launch a military operation. It is the oldest play in the book. It is the Peloponnesian trap, updated for the digital age. The information architecture of this conflict is being drip-fed through social media and leaked naval movements. It keeps the enemy guessing. It keeps the mainstream media chasing their tails. Iran has no advantage, Trump says. That is a power word designed to project absolute confidence. But the geopolitical surgeon knows that Iran's advantage is chaos. They don't need to win. They just need to make the cost of American order too high to pay. If the U.S. has to spend $500 billion a year to keep the strait open, who really wins? The Shah bleeding isn't just about soldiers. It's about the opportunity cost of a superpower tied down in a desert pond. While the U.S. is focused on the bottleneck of Hormuz, China is building the Belt and Road through the heart of Eurasia. They are building the alternative matrix. They are waiting for the U.S. to exhaust itself in the sand trap of the Middle East. Let's look at the visual hook again. 16 black shadows under the water. Each one carries enough firepower to level a city. They are the silent sentinels of a dying order, or a new one. The subtext is that the world of globalism is dead, and we are moving into a world of fortress economics. You protect your own lanes, you tax your enemies, and you let the rest of the world burn. It is a Thamothoa disaster for the naive who believed in a rules-based order, but for the pragmatist, it is just another day on the Barn Khan for chessboard. The blockade will likely involve maritime interdiction operations. This means visit, board, search, and seizure. It is a high-risk, low-reward activity for the sailors involved. One nervous 19-year-old with a rifle can start World War III. And for what? To stop a fee, to protect the dollar. When you strip away the flags and the anthems, it is always about the dong tent money flow. The Kuvas slap to the global economy is coming. Whether it's a soft landing or a crash depends on how many ships decide to test the blockade. If the Shadow Fleet stays in port, the U.S. wins without firing a shot. If they sail, the Materni matrix goes red. We are seeing the application of Sun Tzu in real time. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And by announcing the blockade, Trump is trying to win the war before the first tanker is seized. But Iran has read Sun Tzu too. They know that all warfare is based on deception, and their deception is the idea that they can be filtered. They will find ways to blend their oil, transfer it at sea, and use front companies that even the NSA can't track. The matrix is deeper than a Truth Social post. It is a labyrinth of global finance and ancient rivalries. What happens to the seized oil? The ideas of reconstruction funds for the victims of drone strikes are visual hooks for the public. In reality, that oil will likely disappear into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve or be sold to friendly nations to keep their loyalty. It is a hostile takeover of a commodity. It is piracy with a government seal. The vibe persona here is one of sober realism. We aren't here to cheer for the blue team or the red team. We are here to watch the surgeons work and hope we aren't the ones on the table. The petrodollar is on life support. The blockade is the defibrillator. If it works, the heart of the American empire keeps beating for another decade. If it doesn't, the Pax Sinica begins. Let's wrap this up with a forecast. The next 90 days will determine the ineruptiatur rhythm of the next 20 years. If the blockade holds, Iran collapses internally or is forced to the table on terms of surrender. If the blockade is broken by a Chinese or Russian escort, the U.S. faces a SUBP DDS, and there are no participation trophies in the Strait of Hormuz. The 16 shadows are still there. They don't care about tweets. They don't care about negotiations. They only care about the acoustic signal of an enemy hull. Don't wait for the mainstream media to tell you the war has started. Look at the insurance rates. Look at the shipping routes. Look at the price of gold. The geopolitical surgeon has made the first incision. The matrix is bleeding, and we are all just collateral in the pursuit of pragmatism. The truth lies in the money and the corpses. Right now, the money is moving to the safe havens, and the corpses are being prepared for a Man Sich play that has no happy ending. Stay DNSectaz alert. The Bond T4 is moving faster than you think 1 year from the start of the conflict, and we are already at the end game. The Strait of Hormuz is the DAN, DPA, and Gen bottleneck of history, and history is about to be Feng Trapa blockaded. Good luck to the naive, and the rest of us will be watching the numbers. The exchange ratio is the only Bible that matters now. $2 million versus $20,000. $100 billion versus 26 phone calls. The empire is making its stand. Let's see if the matrix allows it to survive. The truth is not in the headlines. It is in the 16 shadows waiting under the waves. The blockade is here. The woe, as you knew it, is volume, useless. Welcome to the new order. It's 撒两 shot and it's full fan, brutal. Head end.